Don't you get sick of the Israel lobby trying to get us into more wars in the Middle East? Or always abusing Palestinians with your tax dollars? It once seemed like the lobby would always have full-spectrum dominance on the foreign policy discussion in D.C. But those days are over. The Council for the National Interest is the America lobby, standing up and pushing back against the Israel lobby's undue influence on Capitol Hill. Go show some support at councilforthenationalinterest.org. That's councilforthenationalinterest.org.
All right, you guys, welcome back. I'm Scott Horton. It's my show, Scott Horton Show. We're live here on the Liberty Radio Network every weekday from noon to 2 Eastern. All right, 3 great interviews today. Brad Hoff coming up, Mark Thornton. But first, Janet Reitman. And she is writing here for Rolling Stone, a contributing editor there at Rolling Stone. She's the author of the book Inside Scientology, the story of America's most secretive religion. That sounds interesting. And she's written for tons of magazines, says here in her bio. Inside Gitmo, America's Shame, 15 years of pain and suffering outside the rule of law. And why can't we close the prison at Guantanamo Bay? Good question in the subtitle there. Welcome to the show, Janet. How are you?
Good, thanks.
I appreciate you joining us on the show today. Great work on this piece here.
Thanks.
And so let's just dive in, I guess, to the trials themselves. I think that's pretty much where you start the article as well, as kind of the story in the middle of just the absurdity of the process, the current military process for prosecuting the men accused of masterminding and organizing the September 11th attack on the United States. By the way, for future historians, this is being recorded in January of 2016. Okay, so go ahead.
Right. Yes, we were about to start the 15th year of Guantanamo, believe it or not, at the end of January. And well, the first thing to point out is there has not been a trial yet. These are pretrial hearings that have gone on and on now for a number of years and are mired in all kinds of delays and pretrial motions, and none of which have anything to do with any of the merits of the actual case. And they will quite likely continue for the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, what I understand is this could go on until 2020 before any of these guys could actually, begin an actual prosecution.
Mm.
And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The whole thing is it's taking place at the moment. It's taking place offshore, and if and when Guantanamo were to close, they would then have to move them, I guess, to the United States. And I'm not sure how that would work because at this point, the whole idea of having federal prosecutions for KSM and the accused 9/11 plotters was, taken off the table in 2010 around then. So, I mean, this was a great goal of the early Obama administration and Attorney General Eric Holder to try KSM in New York in federal court. Mm-hmm. And, and there were lots of New Yorkers that supported that, including myself as well. It would have been very cathartic for people in the city. It would have been, it would have provided a sense of closure for people, I think. But, for a variety of political reasons, mostly it was untenable, and so they have turned to the military commission system, which is, takes place out of sight of the American public and out of mind of the American public. And but most of all, nothing has happened. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of, and it's a comical almost experience because literally nothing has happened, and you go down there and nothing.
Now, is it literally legally impossible now, or just politically impossible now? To go back legally, to trying to prosecute them in a civilian court?
Well, I mean, according, the Congress has passed in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Bill, for the past 4 or 5 years, it is legally not permissible to bring anybody from Guantanamo to the United States for any reason, which is why, there's been these discussions about whether President Obama would go around the Congress, whether he would, do an executive order, whether he would try to figure out some other way to close Gitmo and bring people there to the U.S. by skirting around that law, because Congress has banned it outright. They are not, they are not allowed in the United States for any reason, and so it renders the whole situation kind of moot at this point. There are some other kinds of, I guess, some fixes for this that some attorneys who are much more schooled in all of this than I am in terms of the legalities have suggested. I mean, a lot of the sort of defense type attorneys will come up with all kinds of ways that the president might be able to close Gitmo. But in terms of, convincing the Congress, it doesn't seem likely, and it certainly is banned in law.
Mm-hmm. And now, so I want to go back to what you were saying about how we're still only in year 10 or whatever it is of the pretrial motions, and we still have 5 more to go, whatever, that kind of deal. And so that reminded me of what I had been instructed previously by the other Scott Horton, the heroic international anti-torture human rights lawyer.
Right.
About how, well, see, the American Republic has been around for a while, and we have a rule of law. We're in a federal courtroom. All the precedent is not just set, but it's all known like the back of their hands by everybody in charge. And so, and it's taken 200 years to refine the system to the way it is now. Whereas in Guantanamo Bay, they're making it up as they go along. And so you basically couldn't have imagined how many open questions there are. And I think really the one example was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed said, I want to wear a camouflage hunting vest to court so he can pretend he's some kind of general in a war instead of some scumbag criminal. And they said, yeah, okay, because there wasn't any rule that said, hell no, you're going to wear a jumpsuit. It wasn't already defined. So sure, you can dress up in fatigues, KSM, to come to your hearings. Mm-hmm. And that was, just one example. And then as you're saying, there could be years more of this ahead.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I found really interesting about this piece of the Guantanamo story is that, from my understanding, when these guys, we'll call them the 9/11-5, which is what they call them, right? So when they were arraigned formally under the new military commission system, this is the Obama military commission system, in 2012 is when they were formally arraigned. And so that's when these hearings all began. Right, and they had, though, since I guess around 2008, they had death penalty lawyers because in the late Bush administration they decided they were going to try to put these guys on trial. They were going to charge them with capital crimes, and so they were given death penalty lawyers, and these death penalty lawyers were and are just absolutely determined to litigate every single tiny aspect of their case in order to save their client's life. Sure. And so, my understanding was that, were these military lawyers, I think the government's assumption was that the military lawyers would just sort of salute and get this done quickly. The military lawyers, the JAG lawyers I've interviewed, said absolutely not. I mean, the JAG lawyers are actually heroic, completely heroic, because they buck their own system. They're bucking their own United States government to defend, accused terrorists. And it makes them, highly unpopular, I think, within the military. But
it makes them exactly the same as John Adams, the great American patriot who created our country and defended those accused in the Boston Massacre.
Right, exactly, except they're viewed as the enemy. They really, their view of themselves is that they are seen as the enemy. And I think that they are. They're not treated very well. They're looked at suspiciously, but I think they're quite heroic, these officers who are defending these guys. But regardless, your point is they are making up every single tiny aspect of the law as they go along, which they have to. I mean, this is not just for their health. This is part of the litigation process, right? Mm-hmm. And but it's delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. And I actually did not personally attend this 9/11 hearing. I attended a different guy's hearing.
All right, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me stop you right there, and we'll pick it up right there on the other side of this break with Janet Reitman. She wrote this great piece, Inside Gitmo, for Rolling Stone. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here for WallStreetWindow.com. Mike Swanson knows his stuff. He made a killing running his own hedge fund and always gets out of the stock market before the government-generated bubbles pop, which is, by the way, what he's doing right now, selling all his stocks and betting on gold and commodities. Sign up at wallstreetwindow.com and get real-time updates from Mike on all his market moves. It's hard to know how to protect your savings and earn a good return in an economy like this. Mike Swanson can help. Follow along on paper and see for yourself. wallstreetwindow.com. Hey, all Scott here. If you're like me, you need coffee. Lots of it. And you probably prefer it tastes good, too. Well, let me tell you about Darren's Coffee Company at darrenscoffee.com. Darren Marion is a natural entrepreneur who decided to leave his corporate job and strike out on his own, making great coffee. And Darren's Coffee is now delivering right to your door. Darren gets his beans direct from farmers around the world. All specialty, premium grade with no filler. Hey, the man just wants everyone to have a chance to taste this great coffee. darrenscoffee.com. Use promo code Scott and you get free shipping. darrenscoffee.com.
All right, kids, welcome back. I'm Scott Horton. It's my show, The Scott Horton Show. I'm talking here with Janet Reitman. She wrote this really important piece. I don't know, it's 5,000 or 10,000 words or something. Great piece of literature here. Inside Gitmo, America's Shame. One of many. And I just wanted to read this quote real quick before we get back to it, where Guantanamo overall is by now nothing more than an elaborate theater piece. Quote, if Abraham Lincoln rode down there on a unicorn, I don't think I'd even think twice, says the Navy commander, about just the absurdity of the entire situation down there. And where we had to go out at the break, you were about to, I'm pretty sure, describe the absurdity of the hearing that you witnessed and when you were down there, Janet.
Well, I mean, one of the for example, I showed up, I went down to attend a hearing of a guy named Hadi al-Iraqi, who pretty much no one, right, has ever heard of, and he has nothing to do with 9/11 or any other, major act of terrorism. He is a Taliban commander who has, like a lot of people, been somehow linked in with al-Qaeda. Whether or not he was a member of al-Qaeda is very, very sketchy.
In other words, al-Iraqi, he was an Arab in Afghanistan.
He was an Arab, Hadi al-Iraqi is an Iraqi who moved to Afghanistan in the early 1990s.
Good enough for me.
Fighting with the Taliban, but as a non-Afghan, is alleged to have been some kind of a liaison with al-Qaeda, and all of this is, up in the air. But he is not accused. He's accused of very sort of traditional types of war crimes, and that we might see even as making him a kind of legitimate combatant. I mean, a person who is serving in the armed forces, in a sense, of his country, his adopted country, under the then government of that country, which was the Taliban. Now, whether or not we respect that or not, that is an argument that this was a legitimate government, that these guys were serving essentially. But the United States does not recognize that, and we consider anybody who fought with the Taliban as being an unprivileged enemy, as they call them, belligerent.
So they're not accusing him of murdering civilians or anything like that, just being part of it.
Yes, no, murder. Well, that's part of his sort of war crimes.
Oh, well.
They accuse him of murdering civilians as part of, not in a 9/11 sense, not in a terrorism sense, but in a kind of, fog of war sense, a kind of, this is a civil war that they were fighting. So yes, there were civilians, there were U.S., but U.S. forces were, or U.S. and other foreign forces, I think, are sort of the more dominant aspects of it. I mean, there's a long charge sheet. It's like 35 charges. So, but the point of it is that he's not a 9/11 guy. When we think of Gitmo, and we think of the prosecutions at Gitmo, we think only of the 9/11 guys. There's only 10 people who are facing any kind of legal proceedings out of over 100 of them now at this point. And several of those people, 3 of them, are just dealing with plea agreements and one challenge to a conviction. The others, there's only 7 of them that are currently in a trial or a pretrial process. And of that group, only Hadi al-Iraqi is kind of moving towards something in a sort of sense. because he is not facing the death penalty, so he doesn't have those kinds of challenges, and he has, in some ways, it's seen as a little bit more of a straightforward situation because these are sort of more traditional war crimes, and this is a war crimes tribunal, right? This is very complicated, by the way. I mean, it took me a long, long time to figure all of this out and sort of understand how to write about it.
But your point about him is
I hope I'm making sense to you, because it's not
Sure.
easy to explain.
Well, I mean, what I want to ask you is, your point about this guy is the absurdity that he's at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, rather than not that he's some innocent guy who just got rounded up like some innocent sheep herder that Bush already sent home. But
Right.
This is somebody who very well may have done something, but why is he in Cuba instead of in prison in Afghanistan?
Well, no, I mean, no, that's not really the. Why would he be in prison in Afghanistan? I mean, Well,
you're saying that was where he committed his war crimes, right?
he committed it, yeah, but I mean, that wouldn't have been we didn't have we consider him as a war criminal.
Okay, then I'm not clear on your point about this particular guy.
The whole point of it is that there's only a handful of people that are even facing trial. The point of the whole story, to be honest with you, is that, these trials, however monumental it will be to see if and when it happens, the 9/11 case, that's not what Gitmo at this point is really about. Gitmo at this point is about warehousing a bunch of other guys that you've never heard of before, a number of whom will never be charged with a crime, will never be tried, and have been there in a kind of purgatorial state for in many cases, for 14 years now. That's what Guantanamo is. That's the aspect of it that's, highly un-American. I mean, in terms of Hadi al-Iraqi, he's a person who, we don't really know anything about. The military has spent a tremendous amount of money, and just in trying to try the guy. We actually wound up flying down to attend the hearings for him that were supposed to be like a week, and then it was shortened to 3 days, and then the trip was delayed by a day for reasons that were never explained to any of us, and we all sort of turned around and went back home again and turned around and came back the next day to fly down to Guantanamo. Who knows what cost to the United States taxpayer, and for essentially what was a 45-minute hearing, and that's what goes on. That's what goes on. You fly down to Gitmo for 45 minutes, essentially, or an hour. You spend 3 days there, though, and there's a lot of delay, and a lot of this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But the other aspect of it that I think is really dramatic is that there are people there that you don't know anything about and that have been there for a long time, and we're not even sure why in many cases.
Yeah, they just came out with one a week or two ago saying, oh, yeah, this guy, he was mistaken identity.
Right.
We've been holding him all this time.
Right.
I mean, maybe Andy Worthington knew of the guy or whatever, but the rest of us had never heard of him.
Right.
I want to get back to what you were saying earlier, too, about the power of the president to close this place. He could start a war in Libya without Congress, but he can't order his troops on Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, to move. Of course he can. And what can Congress do about it other than impeach him and remove him from office? But if he wants to say the prison is closed, put those men on ships and sail them to Florida, and the DOJ better and the Bureau of Prisons better meet him at the shore, then what's Congress going to do about it?
I mean, that's certainly an argument. That a lot of military people will, say, military defense attorneys will say, he can, as commander-in-chief, tell the military, I would like this prison closed. You're going to close it, and then we're going to move these guys to the United States. But it's much more complicated than that. There's very complicated politics involved in all of that. Congress has passed this law. There are some lawyers and analysts who would challenge whether that law is whether Congress really has the power to do this, to bar these people from coming to the U.S.
Which, by the way, do they have a veto-proof majority for this legislation? Is that why he keeps signing legislation that says he can't do this?
No, he signs. This is part of the larger defense spending bill that he signs every year, and it's widely unpopular. The idea of bringing Gitmo prisoners to the United States is seen as a hugely risky. I mean, this is all, by the way, in my view, hugely overblown. I mean, the risk of any of these people after 14 years, I really, I don't know. But the Republicans have made it a talking point for many, many years that these are the worst of the worst, quote unquote. And there's a tremendous amount of fear, and it's, used and exploited very well. And as soon as it comes up that, wait, we might close Gitmo, you have Paul Ryan or someone else saying, no, these are the worst of the worst. And then you have governors and representatives from various states saying, not in my backyard, literally. And so it becomes this whole political football. Well, where are you going to send them? Nobody wants them. Are they going to go? Where are you going to build something for them? What are you going to do with them?
Well, Obama could have done this in 2009, and I remember there was a Washington Post story, I believe, which Glenn Greenwald had written up as well at Salon.com, where they had all these quotes from the senators saying they were geared up, ready to go, but they had no support from the president of the United States to push this agenda whatsoever. And they had completely believed the hype during the campaign, and they thought this is for sure something we're doing. And he had signed the executive order on his first full day in office, and then he did nothing to pursue it whatsoever and left them sticking their neck out, and so they decided to drop it. And that was back in 2009. So, maybe if he had made a serious effort then, things would have been different.
I think there was a great opportunity that was missed at that point, and for a variety of reasons. But it just was not ultimately a priority, the priority that it had been made out to be. And by, within that year, it slipped and slipped and slipped down on the priority list. And then by 2010, when the Republicans took the Congress, it was not able to become the priority that I think the president wanted it to be.
Yeah.
So, and it's a shame, but yes, he had a year. There were a long series of mistakes or missteps, shall we say, that were made during that time that made closing Guantanamo increasingly difficult. And Charlie Savage and Dan Klaidman are two really wonderful authors who have written books that really go into great depth about this. I will plug both of their books, which were very helpful to me. But there's quite a lot of literature out there on that, exactly what happened during that year of 2009. My story is not about that, by the way. My story is about what is happening right now in 2016, after all that time. So.
Well, and something that's worth mentioning here, I'm sorry I'm recording you into the break here for just 1 minute, but it didn't get mentioned, but it deserves some kind of prominence that at least some of the prisoners were tortured down there at Guantanamo Bay in the early years, and that there is ongoing, human tragedy in the form of the various hunger strikes and suicides and attempted suicides and so forth of these people who are being locked up without charges for life.
Just even being, going through a process of review where they, these are people who've been there since, say, 02 or 03, and then, they're reviewed in 2009 or 10 or, and they're said, okay, you know what, you're cleared to go, and then they don't leave. You don't know when they're going to leave. This happened with a lot of the guys from Yemen. There's a huge number of them that are from Yemen, and they can't return to Yemen. This is also part of the NDAA. They can't return to Yemen. There's several countries that, they will not be able to be transferred back to, and Yemen is one of them, Syria is another one. But, you have a number of them. I mean, I think a large majority are Yemeni, and they can't go home. And so they have to find a country, a host country, to accept them. And, as a number of really very good recent reports have noted, the Defense Department, this is what I heard in my reporting as well, the DoD has had a long pattern of trying to block these transfers. And so you have these guys that for one reason or another will have their transfer, or release delayed. And they'll just sit there and languish. And I mean, that is an unending sense of torture, if you can imagine that. You're told, that is truly, I hate to use that word Kafkaesque, but it actually really is. I mean, that is, you can go, but you can't go. And that's been the situation for these people who are considered the low level. These are people who may not, have done really anything other than be a foot soldier or something like that. Right. Then you have the guys who, like, Hadi al-Iraqi and particularly, KSM and the others, and another group of them, there's about 14, who are considered high-value detainees, and these are people who were in CIA detention initially. And so they came to Guantanamo between 06 and 08 from the CIA black sites, and, all underwent something. I mean, to what degree, they were all tortured, you can read it in the torture report, but it goes into quite a lot of depth about a number of them. But, these guys have endured a tremendous amount, and they're just, locked away in a secret prison, actually, that none of us can see, or their attorneys can't even talk about it, or else, without risking their security clearance. And, we didn't even know it existed officially until a few years ago. And that's where they live. And these are the people that, will likely never, be released, unless some kind of deal is brokered.
All right, with that, I'll have to leave it short. I'm sorry, because I have more questions for you. Great piece of journalism here. I really appreciate your time on the show, Janet.
Thanks so much.
All right, y'all, that's Janet Reitman, and here she is in RollingStone.com, Inside Gitmo, America's Shame, and we'll be right back with Mark Thornton in just a sec.
Hey, Scott Horton here to tell you about this great new book by Michael Swanson, The War State. In The War State, Swanson examines how Presidents Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy both expanded and fought to limit the rise of the new national security state after World War II. If this nation is ever to live up to its creed of liberty and prosperity for everyone, we are going to have to abolish the empire. Know your enemy. Get The War State by Michael Swanson. It's available at your local bookstore or at Amazon.com in Kindle or in paperback. Just click the book in the right margin at scotthorton.org or thewarstate.com. This part of the Scott Horton Show is sponsored by Audible.com. And right now, if you go to audibletrial.com/Scott Horton Show, you can get your first audiobook for free. Of course, I'm recommending Michael Swanson's book, The War State, the Cold War origins of the military-industrial complex and the power elite. Maybe you've already bought The War State in paperback, but you just can't find the time to read it. Well, now you can listen while you're out marching around. Get the free audiobook of The War State by Michael Swanson, produced by Listen and Think Audio at audibletrial.com/Scott Horton Show. Hey, Scott Horton here. It's always safe to say that one should keep at least some of your savings in precious metals as a hedge against inflation. And if this economy ever does heat back up and the banks start expanding credit, rising prices could make metals a very profitable bet. Since 1977, Robertson Roberts Brokerage Inc. has been helping people buy and sell gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, and they do it well. They're fast, reliable, and trusted for more than 35 years. And they take Bitcoin. Call Robertson Roberts at 1-800-874-9760 or stop by rrbi.co.